Did the Baltimore Ravens win the Orlando Brown Jr. trade? We talk about that and more next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. And we're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. And we're back here with another episode, a midweek one. So that means we'll be diving into our mailbag here today. We'll do that in the final segment, talking about Ravens rookie stat predictions, Kyle Hamilton, potential defensive rookie of the year odds. But today in the second segment, and what I really want to focus on is the Orlando Brown Jr. trade. We're going to take a look back on that whole thing. Obviously, it went down right before the draft in 2021. And talk about if the Ravens won that deal, because obviously Orlando Brown has now played out 1 year there in Kansas City. The Ravens got 1 year of it off Elway so far, a couple others, some other draft capital in there. And also, Orlando Brown did not agree to a deal with the Kansas City Chiefs before the franchise tag deadline ended. And it was a big one that they offered him. So I do want to just talk about that whole situation and whether Orlando Brown Jr. and potentially that big contract is what the Ravens do need right now. And some aspects maybe is, some aspects maybe isn't. So we'll talk about that in the second segment. In the first segment, though, I do want to talk a bit about the excitement surrounding this rookie class for Baltimore here in 2022. 11 players. Really talented offense, defense, even some special teams thrown in there. Can't forget about special teams. Just talking about those guys, the roles that they could have. We'll do that here in the first segment. So a ton to dive into. If you hear this on YouTube, though, in video form, you see everything, my face, my background, everything. Thank you for tuning in and watching. Be sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Like the video. It helps out a ton. Our next goal here is 3,000 subscribers on YouTube. We've done 1,000. We've done 2,000. Well, next we're looking for 3,000. So thank you for your future subscription. And if you're wondering why you should subscribe, we put out daily Ravens content 5 days a week. So Ravens news, opinions, analysis, updates, everything under the sun, Ravens. We have that here for you Monday through Friday. And also in audio form, thank you so much for tuning in and following along with us. The same show in both audio and video form. You're not missing out on anything, I promise. Be sure to follow along anywhere you get your podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere. And thank you again for listening, whether it's on your way to work, on your way from work, or wherever you are listening. And also be sure to follow me on Twitter at CashRocket34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. But let's now dive into the Ravens content here today. And let's start talking about these rookies. Rookies reporting yesterday to training camp. The veterans follow soon after, next week. And then, I mean, look, training camp begins, and it's super exciting. The fact that now we have waited what seems like forever. I mean, it seems like it's been a very long time. The Ravens last playing football in early January. Here we are now in mid/latest July, and we're now just starting to get back into the swing of things. I'm excited for Ravens football. I hope everybody listening is excited too, because this team, it feels special. I think the depth this year, as I've talked about, really helps that out. And part of that is the rookies that the Ravens brought in. We do know the Ravens draft strategy. We understand what their strategy is in multiple aspects in terms of, they're not going to go and necessarily draft need. They look at the talent. They look at the best players available. And in Kyle Hamilton's case, clearly the best guy on the board when the Ravens were up, and they made the right decision, in my opinion. And I know some people maybe wanted a wideout. Some people maybe wanted an offensive tackle. I think the Ravens made the right decision in Kyle Hamilton because it's a player. You go back to Marlon Humphrey, that selection, what seems like years and years ago, really wasn't that long ago. But you go back to Marlon Humphrey, and he was a player that he was picked, and people were like, why are they picking a cornerback? They have Jimmy Smith. They brought in Brandon Carr. They don't need another cornerback. Well, where are we now with Marlon Humphrey now being the top corner there? Jimmy Smith not on the team anymore, hasn't announced anything on his future, actually, at the time of this recording. Brandon Carr hasn't been with the team for a couple of seasons. Marlon Humphrey is a top 5 player at this position at minimum, in my opinion. So maybe Kyle Hamilton takes that same path here. Now, I think the Ravens safety group now has a lot more longevity than I think that cornerback group did, just because Jimmy Smith was getting up there in age. Brandon Carr was already pretty old for football standards. So I think that now you have Marcus Williams, who's 25, Chuck Clark, who's under 30. You have players that I think are going to be relatively healthy for a long time. There haven't been a ton of durability issues with those guys for the most part. They're going to be around for a long time, whether that's with the Ravens or not. Marcus Williams signs a 5-year deal, so I think he'll be around for a little bit. Kyle Hamilton on his rookie deal. The only real question mark is what will Chuck Clark do? Is he going to be around? So I think for the Ravens, Kyle Hamilton, he's going to play a big role early on. Might not, start, but again, for the safety position, is not as big as the center position where we're going to next with starts, because with safety, you can be on the field for 90% of snaps and not actually start. For the center position, there is a starting center. And I think that is going to be Linderbaum. We talked about that with Spencer Schultz yesterday. And if you haven't checked that episode out, I highly recommend you do so. We talk about rookie expectations and just who to watch from the rookie class of training camp. But yeah, I think Linderbaum is going to probably, as I did say yesterday, and Spencer did too, start off maybe second on the depth chart. That seems like it could be a thing. And then he has to work his way up, kind of giving the veteran the respect and the nod there. And McCary, who has played well at multiple different positions, not just center. He played well at tackle last year. Linderbaum and Hamilton, I think, 2 very good first-round picks. You look at Ajabo, David Ajabo is someone who, I don't know, I don't expect him to be on the field at training camp. I think October, November could be when the Ravens are looking at with him. He could play week 1. He could not play the entire year. It's very unknown with him, but still, I think getting a talent like that who was projected to the Ravens at 14 in a lot of mock drafts before he got injured, getting him in the 40s, I think, was just phenomenal. So I'm glad the Ravens made that selection. Travis Jones is somebody who I'm super excited about. Interior pass rushing presence. The Ravens haven't necessarily had that big of a pass rush from the interior in a little bit now. And again, really the Ravens defense struggled with sacks in the Don Martindale era. It wasn't just on the interior, but they brought in Calais Campbell, who was a very good interior pass rusher, and it hasn't really worked out in terms of sacks. Derek Wolfe, who was a good interior pass rusher, didn't work out in terms of sacks. So I think that Travis Jones, and obviously with Mike McDonald now there, that'll help out a ton. And then you have the 6 fourth-rounders. I mean, again, I thought they were going to package some picks, maybe move up and down the draft board a little bit. Baltimore ends up taking all 6 guys. I think Daniel Filelli is a very interesting player. I think that he, again, is more of a redshirt candidate this year. Really, in my opinion, has a little bit to refine and just get better at. He's a raw prospect. He's somebody who I think a lot of people have compared to the Orlando Brown Jr. The comp, just because of the size and everything, the rawness coming out of school a little bit. But I think now what you have is a player that can work behind Morgan Moses, work behind Jawan James, and kind of figure stuff out. I think that's a very good thing for this team. And then Jalen Armour-Davis is a player that I think, maybe might not get a ton of snaps right away, especially if everybody is healthy. So if Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Kyle Fuller are all there, plus you have Brandon Stevens potentially playing some corner, or Darius Washington maybe playing in the slot a little bit. Maybe it might be a little hard for the rookie corners to get some defensive snaps, at least meaningful ones early on. So that being Jalen Armour-Davis and Pepe Williams, who we'll talk about in a second. The next pick ended up being Charlie Kolar, who I think does have potential in this offense. I think the Ravens are going to keep 4 tight ends, the 2 vets they have, the 2 rookies they have. That'll be big. I think Kolar is somebody who does project a little bit over to Mark Andrews and can be used in this offense in a lot of different ways. Jordan Stout, a player that I know a lot of people are excited about. A lot of people are sad about the Sam Cook retirement, right? It's a kind of a bittersweet thing, moving on from such a big part of the organization, but now moving into a new era with Jordan Stout. Then you have Isaiah Likely, who can just be utilized all over the football field. A player that I think is going to be used a lot in a lot of different areas. I think maybe might not see as many snaps early on, but the Ravens receiving core looking like what it is right now with all the young guys, I think Isaiah Likely can be kind of one of those young guys, just more of in a tight end's body, I would say. Then you do have Pepe Williams, who can play the slot, play some safety. You can put him outside if you want to. His profile does, I think, project him over to the slot, I think, at the end of the day. So maybe a Tavon Young replacement potentially. We could see with him. I don't think a ton of snaps early on. And then last, who was not a 4th-round pick, ended up being a 6th-rounder, Tyler Beatty, who could have a huge role entering the year. I mean, depending on what happens with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, I think if Beatty has to play significant snaps early on, let's say, and we talked about this before, Dobbins and Edwards have to go on the PUP list, I think that a tandem of Mike Davis and Tyler Beatty is a lot better than what the Ravens had last year, coming in with Latavius Murray, Devonta Freeman, Le'Veon Bell, who hadn't been with the team, had to learn the playbook, catch up to that whole thing. And I think Davis and Beatty just give them a skill set that they need in terms of being able to bounce off of guys. They're both pass catchers and good ones. So I think that I'm excited for what Beatty can bring to the table, definitely. Then you look at the undrafted class. I mean, you have a lot of good big-bodied receivers, Mekhi Polk, Shamar Bridges, Devin Williams. You also have Slade Bolden, who's on the smaller side, but still a very good player. You have Ricky Person, who's a running back. You got some offensive linemen who can make an impact, defensive linemen, a lot of inside linebackers too. Zacoby McClain, Josh Ross, to name a few of those guys. Outside linebackers, Jeremiah Moon, one of those guys. I don't necessarily see a corner or safety undrafted making this team, but I could definitely see like one outside linebacker, one inside linebacker making the roster undrafted wise. So a lot of talent in this draft class and undrafted class as well. And we'll get back into them in the final segment as we talk about some stat predictions. So be sure to stay tuned for all that. But we still have a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. Coming up, we're going to be diving into the Orlando Brown Jr. trade, looking back on it over a year later and discussing if the Ravens were the winners in that deal. So be sure to stay tuned. Still going to talk about here on the show. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about Bet Online, and BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news of every league, so that includes Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, you got combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for our sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered all over the place. So head over to BetOnline today or use the mobile device to learn more about the trends in action happening today in sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you again. Thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen today. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, like this video on YouTube. Be sure to follow us in audio form as well and turn notifications on there. And also, if you're wondering which NFL stars moved the betting lines the most, starting on July 18th, so a couple days ago, Locked On, we're giving you the top 50 most valuable players in the NFL from the odds makers at BetOnline. So it's available now on the Locked On NFL podcast, wherever you get your podcast. So that can also be on YouTube because we are available anywhere you get your podcast. But let's now talk about the Orlando Brown Jr. trade and looking back on that whole situation, because recently the franchise tag deadline passed, the Chiefs franchise tagging Orlando Brown Jr. I think there was some expectation that Brown would have been franchise tagged, but then a deal would have been reached. Well, Brown does get the franchise tag, but the deal does not get reached after, I think, a lot of speculation that, they're going to come to a deal. It's going to be fine. Now, the actual specs of the deal, the reported deal was in the 6-year, $139 million range, and including a $30.25 million signing bonus, $95 million in the first 5 years. So that averages out to about $23.16 million. And Nick Jacobs, who kind of has been posting a lot of these things, he's one of the sports producers over at KSHB41. He talked a bit about what he thinks could be going on here, and he says that he thinks that Orlando Brown might want to surpass Ronnie Stanley's guarantees. So actually comparing those deals real quick, because he actually put out something comparing the deals. The reported deal for Orlando Brown, again, 6 years, $139, $31 million, signing bonus, $38 fully guaranteed, $52.25 in injury guarantees. Ronnie Stanley's was 5 years, $98.75 million. You got $22.5 million in signing bonus, $64.1 million guaranteed at signing, and this whole $64 million in total guarantees there. So Stanley's only making but he's making $19.75 average annual value per year, whereas the reported deal for Brown would have been $23.16. So he would have been the highest paid tackle in terms of average annual value in this, because he has the 23.16. You have Trent Williams at 23.01, Stanley at 19.75. Then you also have David Bakhtiari at 23 and Laramie Tunsil at 20. But let's just go back now to what the whole situation was for the Ravens. So obviously the Ravens had these awesome bookend tackles, Ronnie Stanley on the left side, Orlando Brown Jr. on the right side. Things are looking up. It was going to be, all right, cool. You pay Ronnie Stanley left tackle money. Orlando Brown's going to be on the right side. He did play left tackle at Oklahoma. That was the position he played. The Ravens moved him over to the right side. You look back to the middle of 2020, unfortunately for Ronnie Stanley, you have TJ Watt getting thrown into his ankle, just a brutal, gruesome injury. Stanley misses the end of that year, has only played one game since. But because of that, the Ravens had to do some shuffling on their offensive line, which included moving Orlando Brown Jr. over to the left tackle position for the rest of the season. Now, he had played a game, I think, what was it, against Washington? I think it was it a concussion? I can't remember what the injury was Stanley had, but I think Orlando Brown Jr. played that one game there. He plays out the rest of the year at left tackle. And then after the year, everybody's like, this is awesome. Ronnie Stanley's going to come back. Orlando Brown Jr. proved that he's versatile. He can play on the right side. He can play on the left side. And then the tweets started to come out, saying I'm a left tackle, and then ultimately demanding a trade pretty much, and saying and making it clear that it wasn't because of the organization, it was because he wants to fulfill his father's dream for him, the late Orlando Brown Sr., of playing left tackle at the highest level. I know that there are all the stories about how when his youth coaches wanted to put him over at the right tackle position, his dad would say, no, put him at defensive line if you're not putting him at left tackle. I know that those types of stories have come out. So I know a lot of people, like some people were like, oh, that's awesome. Like, I said, whatever Orlando Brown Jr. wants, that's what he wants. Like, there's not going to be someone who can change his mind and say, no, you're playing right tackle and that's it. So at the end of the day, there were some people who were speculating, oh, this is fully money driven. It's nothing to do with the dream. I don't think that was the case, but partially, I think it definitely had to do a bit with money. I don't think Orlando Brown is this greedy person who's like, I want money, 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 money. I'm sure that he does want to get paid and he deserves to get paid. But at the end of the day, the Ravens end up looking for packages because really what was going on was it seemed like if the Ravens didn't move on from Orlando Brown in that year and they say, you know what, we're going to let you play out your rookie deal, and then we're going to try to sign you. Orlando Brown probably would have left because he knows that Ronnie Stanley is the left tackle there. I know fans had conversations about trading Ronnie Stanley and everything and just putting Orlando Brown over there. I mean, at the end of the day, the Ravens decide to choose Ronnie Stanley in the situation, and Orlando Brown Jr. becomes, it's all right. It's either he's playing right tackle in this organization or he's going to get out of the organization. And what ends up happening is the Ravens end up trading him to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, the package ended up being a lot of different things, but really it was Orlando Brown, a second rounder, and then a late round pick going in 2022, a late round pick in 2022, going to Kansas City. And then coming back to Baltimore was a first round pick, a third round pick, a fourth round pick, and then future fifth, 2022 fifth round selection. So my initial thoughts on this deal were I liked it for the Ravens, except the fact that they gave up the second round pick. I thought that it would have been a great, amazing deal if they hadn't had to give the second round pick because they did. I thought it was good. I thought it was pretty good. And the reason I say that is because there were a lot of players available in that second round that really could have helped out the Ravens last year, could really be key parts on this either offense or defense or whatever. I mean, Creed Humphrey was taken in that second round, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, guys who people thought were going in the first, all of a sudden fall to the second round. And the Ravens had this same thing happen back in 2019 when they traded their second rounder for Lamar Jackson, which again, that was a move that was absolutely worth it. But then guys like Eric McCoy come off the board, who's turned into a great safety or a great center for the Saints. So again, there were a lot of talented second round picks there, and the Ravens had to give that second round pick up. But I still think, again, getting a first round pick was huge because at that point, Orlando Brown Jr. had made his stance pretty clear that, he wanted out unless he was playing left tackle. So I think he lost the Ravens a decent amount of leverage there. So the questions were there going to be any teams at all that were going to give up a first rounder for Orlando Brown Jr.? I think Kansas City was the deal that the Ravens ultimately settled on because they were getting not just a first rounder, but other draft capital as well. So if the Ravens had gotten, let's say, like pick 34, which is an early second rounder instead of 31, something that's really big in these situations is the fifth-year option. I know they have changed it around a little bit just because of the new CBA, but what it used to be, I know it was like the flat whatever, but now what it is based off of incentives. So playing time incentives, Pro Bowl incentives, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why different fifth-year options can have different prices, why players who were drafted later can have more expensive fifth-year options than players who were drafted earlier. But still, having that fifth year of control over a player for teams is very important to them still. So I think that was big for the Ravens. Plus, who knows if Owe, who was the pick at 31, ended up making it to 34 if that's what the pick the Ravens got were. So there was a little bit of deep digging here by Spencer Schultz, friend of the show. We had him on yesterday. And pretty much he looked into the package. And the package overall was Orlando Brown Jr., Nick Bolton, who was the 58th pick, and then Mike Hughes, who the Chiefs got in a trade, trading away that late round pick they got for the Ravens. So the Chiefs get Orlando Brown Jr., Nick Bolton, and Mike Hughes. The Ravens get Odafe Owe, Ben Cleveland, and then that fourth rounder was actually traded. Then Tyler Beatty was in there. You have a 2023 fifth, and then you also have Daniel Falele. So for the Ravens, this is pretty much a haul of players. So to make it less confusing, because I know that was pretty confusing, it was Orlando Brown Jr., Nick Bolton, and Mike Hughes for Odafe Owe, Ben Cleveland, Tyler Beatty, a 2023 fifth, and Daniel Falele is what Spencer ended up coming up with here. So I think that overall, you get 5 rookie contract players, probably 2 to 3 starters and 1 to 2 rotational players. That's what Spencer says here. And it's like you can't really define a winner this early on. Like, I think the Ravens will ultimately, I think both sides will end up being winners in this trade. Who will be the bigger winner? That's still to be determined, but we don't know what Adafe Owe is at his full potential yet. We don't know what Ben Cleveland is yet. Does he win the left guard job? We don't know. I mean, Tyler Linderbaum, Jordan Stout, Tyler Beatty, Daniel Flatley, we haven't seen those guys play. And then the 2023 fifth, the guy hasn't even been drafted yet. So I think it's hard to say, well, you're looking at all these players. Orlando Brown Jr. has only played 1 year there. His year in Kansas City started off really rough. Like, he did not have a great start to the year there in Kansas City. Ended up playing decently well towards the end of the season, but the fact that now Orlando Brown wants to be obviously the highest paid tackle, and the Chiefs offered him huge money. Like, it's not like the Chiefs turned around and said, oh, we're not going to give you anything. They offered him a massive contract. But Orlando Brown wants to hold out for that money. I know there's been rumblings about, Orlando Brown is frustrating the Chiefs, and one Chiefs front office person told somebody that this isn't the guy we traded for in terms of Brown coming to Kansas City as a team player that's willing to work out a team-friendly deal, and then turns down this huge contract. I'm not going to paint Orlando Brown Jr. to be this bad guy. I don't think he is. He wants to get paid. He deserves to get paid. He's a player that, he wants to be able to show his worth. And I think now, obviously, the reports are the both sides are still hopeful a deal will be able to work out after this season. But imagine if the Ravens had to deal with this situation and the Lamar Jackson situation. I mean, at this point, I think the Ravens, they would have loved to have Orlando Brown Jr. last year based off the injuries they went through. Orlando Brown playing on the left side when Ronnie Stanley goes down. You can use him as a right tackle. But the thing is, Orlando Brown Jr. did not want to play right tackle. He still does not want to play right tackle. There were people in Kansas City who are saying, well, he has so much versatility. You can play him either way if you want to. And, you're thinking, no, you can't. Like, he doesn't want to play right tackle. Like, that's not what the Chiefs brought him in to do. They brought him in there to be a left tackle. Orlando Brown made it clear. He said, I am a left tackle. So if the Ravens had to pay up big money to Orlando Brown, pay up big money to Lamar Jackson, I mean, if they had to prioritize one or the other, I'm taking Lamar Jackson 10 out of 10 times. And what we've learned here, because the Ravens do draft so well in most situations, is the fact that Baltimore can't keep all their homegrown talent. Matthew Judon departs, Darius Smith departs, a lot of other guys, right? These players, they earn contracts elsewhere, right? Teams have more salary cap space than the Ravens sometimes because of the fact that Baltimore continues to, reward their own players with good extensions, but they can't do that with every single player. There's just not enough cap space. And I know the whole conversation about, the cap isn't real, the cap this, the cap that, but you can't, it's not possible to continue to push this money down the line and have 10, 12, 15, 20 players on massive deals. It's just not how the NFL works. So maybe the Ravens wouldn't even have had enough money to pay Orlando Brown. It seems like they might not have at this point. So hindsight can be 20/20 in terms of, the Ravens could have used them on the offensive line last year. I think the Ravens are winners in the deal. I'm not saying the Chiefs aren't. I think right now it's still too early to tell, though. I think we can revisit this probably after year 3 of Adafe Owe and Ben Cleveland and figure things out a little bit more. But we just don't know what those guys are yet. So we might be looking 5 years down the line and saying, well, now we can really grade out the deal. But early reactions, I honestly think both sides are a winner. I think it really worked out for the Ravens. I know that they would love to have Brown on that offensive line, but at the end of the day, they had to move on because Brown didn't want to play right tackle, and that's what it was. So I think that Baltimore did get a haul for him. I think the first round pick was huge. I think Owe has a ton of potential. Same thing with Ben Cleveland and the other players Baltimore did draft in that deal. So I think that for the Ravens, they made a smart deal at the time. The Chiefs got a left tackle with a future. If they can obviously sign him to that deal, they're going to pay him a lot of money to do so, but he is one of the best in the league. So again, I think Baltimore's a winner. I also think Kansas City's a winner, but we'll see. We'll see how things work out over the course of time. I mean, really, with this whole thing, time it will tell. We'll head into our final break here on the show. When we get back, we'll be diving into mailbag questions. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still hanging out with you here. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, like this video, follow us in audio form, everything the whole 9 yards, and be sure to make your second listen of the day Locked On NFL. I hosted the Monday show, so if you haven't checked out our Monday show yet over there, be sure to do that. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including on YouTube. But let's dive into some mailbag questions now. We have 2 of them relating to the rookies. And the first question we have here, is going to be from Afida Foy, who says, hello, Kevin. In your opinion, what are the odds of Kyle Hamilton being Defensive Rookie of the Year? Thank you for your work and passion. Have a nice day. And thank you so much. Have a nice day, too. I always look forward to these questions. And I think for me, let's head over. Let's head over to handy dandy Bet Online. You've heard me talk about Bet Online before. And actually, for Defensive Rookie of the Year, the odds here, Kyle Hamilton comes in at number 2 at plus 700. The only person, well, I guess tied for second with plus 700, Kayvon Thibodeau, the Giants rookie, is also at plus 700. Aiden Hutchinson comes in leading the pack here at plus 450. I think that's fair. I think for me, in my opinion, I think that Kyle Hamilton, in terms of odds makers, should come in no lower than 6th in the absolute worst case scenario. Like absolute worst case, I think Kyle Hamilton should come in no lower than 6th. I think in the conversation, in my opinion, for this award is going to be Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau. Then you have Sauce Gardner, Derek Stingley, and potentially Trayvon Walker, and also Kyle Hamilton in there too. The way you can order those is different. I personally have Hamilton with the third best odds. Like I know BetOnline has him as tied for second, but I think maybe I would place Hamilton, I don't know, around 750 and move Thibodeau up, or it's very close between those two. But I think it's fair to put Hutchinson 1. I think Thibodeau for me is 2, and then Kyle Hamilton is 3. I just think for the impact he can have on this team, on this defense, the way the Ravens utilize their defensive backs that can play him in so many different areas, he's going to be huge. I know that, like, if Aiden Hutchinson goes out or Kayvon Thibodeau goes out and has like a 15-sack season or something, the award's probably going to go to them. But the award is more than just a stats thing, right? I mean, you look at what Hamilton brings, both from a deep field perspective, a physicality perspective. You can move him everywhere you want. If you're Mike McDonald, he'll be playing with really good guys. So I think that Hamilton, yeah, he has, I'll put him at number 3. I think right now he has the third best shot to win Defensive Rookie of the Year for me. I think he's a player that slid a little too far. And when you're looking at, Aiden Hutchinson was taken 2nd and Kayvon Thibodeau was taken 5th, why would a guy 14th win it? It doesn't matter where he's drafted, right? I think he was drafted into a great situation. Like some of these guys, great players, but the situation isn't really ideal for them or what they want or how they can maximize their skill set. For Hamilton, I think the Ravens can utilize his skill set in many different ways. So I'm excited for what Hamilton can bring to the table. I think he has a really, really bright future ahead. That starts off this year in his rookie season. Obviously, with rookies reporting, everything is very exciting right now. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what he can bring, definitely. And then our final question here comes from Baltimore Wizard. He asked, what are your rookie stat predictions before camp? And this is a really good question. I'm going to actually talk about these a bit more, like as the offseason continues to go on here, when his training camp continues. But what I'll do here is I'll read off each of the projections the Baltimore Wizard has. I'll give my predictions too here. So first of all, for Kyle Hamilton, he has 4 interceptions, 65 tackles, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. I'd say these are pretty accurate. Like maybe I'd give him, I'd say 65 tackles could be right in that range. Maybe depending on how much he plays, you could see 70, especially if he's involved in the run game. I could see 2 sacks. I think interception-wise, I'm going to go in the 3 to 5 range. So if you want to round that, I think it is 4. I think he'll have 2 or 3 forced fumbles, though. Maybe you see a couple fumble recoveries, maybe like 6 or 7 passes deflected. Like he has the potential if he plays a ton. Like if the Ravens don't go the whole we're going to play the veterans first route and Kyle Hamilton will still play a lot, but not as much as the veterans route. If he's just thrown in, I could see like a 70, 80 tackle season for him, maybe 5 interceptions. But I think he's a player that's going to really have a great season. David Ojabo, 3 sacks, 15 tackles, 1 tackle for loss. This obviously is very dependent. And for the offensive linemen, I mean, there's not really a ton of stats you can do for them, so that's why we're skipping over him here. David Ojabo with the 3 sacks, 15 tackles, 1 tackle for loss. I'm going to say Ojabo, if he plays, I think it'll be towards the back half of the season. I'll say for Ojabo, 2 sacks, 15 tackles seems fine, and then I'll say 5 tackles for loss. I think he could be involved there. Maybe you could throw in a forced fumble as well, but I just don't know how much he's going to play. Like it's really tough to see for him. Travis Jones, 2.5 sacks, 19 tackles. I think this is going to be more. I think Travis Jones might have 25 tackles and let's call it 3.5 sacks. I think he will have a little bit better of a stat line here than Baltimore Wizard, but right in the same ballpark. It's not too different. Armour-Davis, 1 interception, 3 passes defended, 15 tackles. I'll give Jalen Armour-Davis 20 tackles. I'll give him the 1 interception and maybe 2 passes deflected. This depends a lot on health. I think, again, as I talked about with Humphrey, Peters, Fuller, if those 3 are healthy, Armour-Davis is probably not going to see the field a ton. So this is right in that range potentially. Charlie Kolar, 12 catches, 120 yards, and 1 touchdown. Yeah, maybe I'd give him 15 catches for like 130 and a score, but I think these are pretty accurate. Isaiah Likely, 25 catches for 203 touchdowns. I'll say Likely. I'm gonna go 30 catches. I'm gonna go 250 yards, and I'm gonna go 2 touchdowns for Isaiah Likely. I think that he'll have opportunities to produce. They could use him in the red zone in a lot of areas too, so I could see more touchdowns. But I'm gonna go on the lower side for now. Pepe Williams, 2 interceptions, 25 tackles. This depends on if he starts in the slot. I don't think he will. I say Williams has 1 interception and 15 tackles. I think his role this year is primarily going to be special teams. I don't see him having a massive role on defense. Tyler Beatty, 20 rushes for 145 yards. Well, I'm hammering the over on this. I'm hammering the over on this one. It depends what happens with Dobbins and Edwards, obviously. You look at it, if everybody's healthy, Beatty's probably 4th on that depth chart if you want to give the veteran edge to Mike Davis. I'm going to say Tyler Beatty has 50 carries for 375 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think that's what it's going to be for him. He's going to be involved, I think. I think Baltimore, again, is not going to want to rush their guys back. They're not going to want to rush Dobbins or Edwards. So if that means leaving them out of games entirely to start the year, snap counts, I think we'll see when they do come back. I think Beatty and Davis are going to have huge roles on this team. Well, maybe not huge if everybody's healthy, but decently sized roles on this team. So, yeah, I think Beatty will definitely have more than 20 carries. I think he will have a decently big role. And you can even throw catches in there too. I think he'll probably have some, maybe like 15, 20 catches in that area because he also was very good in that game. So yeah, I want to talk about those more as the training camp progresses and as we get closer to the season. But 2 really good questions there. Rookies are here. Rookies are at training camp now. I keep saying mini camp. It's at training camp now. It's very exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do. Definitely. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens content, of course. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.